Katerina Jakob watched the German soldiers flee. Streaming from the east, that's what she was seeing. Allied bombers flew above them. She thought they all might die, and then soon there was the silence of all the SS men. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Katerina Jakob saw red flags flapping in the breeze above the Russian tanks, and she fell upon her knees. And so many different voices in so many different tongues sang the most beautiful song that could ever have been sung. In German, Lithuanian, in Polish and in Dutch, a myriad of melodies has never had been such. In Russian and in Yiddish, Italian and French, emerging from the forests beneath the trench. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Völker hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Völker hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht.
Hello and welcome to Revolutionary Socialist Review with Rainer Shea. That's the fella sitting right across from me here. Well, right across and several hundred miles. And me, Chris Driscoll. Today's episode will include Biden's Democracy Summit. Democracy in quotes, because we all know it's not real democracy. And U.S. military fear of civil war. This is the episode for December 2nd, 2021. Where has 2021 gone? Boy, this year has just leaped across my vision like a darting gazelle or something. It's really gone fast. Anyway, first up on the list, Biden's Democracy Summit, America's push for world domination. On December 9th and 10th, just about a week away, the American president will host a virtual meeting titled a Democracy Summit with participation from many countries with all their variety of government and political systems, and even the participation of Chinese renegade province, Taiwan, justly angering China, perhaps the world's largest socialist democracy, which is pointedly not invited. And they say possibly the largest. No. China is the largest socialist democracy in the world. Whoever wrote this article's a bit equivocating, more so than need be. This meeting is a follow-up to the dress rehearsal Copenhagen Democracy Summit held in 2018, and again in May of this year, which I wrote about at the time as a meeting of new Nazis organized by the Alliance of Democracies, so-called, meaning the USA and its allies and nations seeking its favor. I do not think my characterization was far off the mark. And the I here is not me. The I in this article is the author of the article. You can get all that information from the link that we'll place below this video when we're done. That rehearsal revealed what it was all about, with the opening address made by the former Secretary General of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who was head of NATO when the US and its allies attacked Libya and murdered Gaddafi, overthrew the socialist democracy there, and reducing it to chaos and civil war. It is worth mentioning his other accomplishments, since he is emblematic of the cabal that is organizing the summit. As Prime Minister of Denmark, he supported the invasion of Iraq, the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, the Israelis against Palestinians, and at home, this Democrat lowered corporate and property taxes for the benefit of the rich while shifting the tax burden to working people through sales taxes, and reduced democracy in Denmark by reducing the number of small towns and regions into larger ones, with a consequent reduction of the ability of people to have their voices heard about local issues, and all the time encouraged privatization of the economy. It was he who founded the Alliance of Democracies in 2017, along with his friend Joe Biden, who made the first address to its members in 2018, the whole thrust of which is to advocate free markets and hegemonic control of them by the US and its NATO allies. The list of countries that are invited to the December Biden summit is long, but does not include China, Russia, Turkey, Iran, the DPRK, Venezuela, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Hungary, and Belarus. There are only 2 countries from the Middle East, Israel and Iraq, and only 16 nations from Africa out of 54. The participants include nations where the existence of democracy, whatever its form, is questionable, such as Kosovo, the key province of Serbia occupied by NATO and handed over to the terrorists of the Kosovo Liberation Army, and Ukraine, where the elected government was overthrown in a NATO-backed coup in 2014 and replaced with US puppets with strong fascist tendencies, and which has attacked its own people in the Donbass. And when this guy says attacked, what they mean is constant shelling of residential neighborhoods. That's what the attack entailed. No, the Democracy Summit is purely a capitalist affair, and even then does not include capitalist states that the Americans view as being in the way of their conquest for world hegemony, Russia being the most notable. So what are your thoughts, Rainer Shea?
Apparently, Iraq is still within the fold of US imperialism, but there's a push and pull between Washington and Iran when it comes to Iraq. Iraq's people are certainly not able to be brought into the fold of imperialism in terms of believing pro-US narratives. The US has obviously alienated the majority of the people in not just Iraq, but probably most of these countries. The only reason why any of the non-imperialist countries on this list participate in this charade is because they have neo-colonial governments. And in places like Honduras and Peru, the people are throwing off this neo-colonial control. This year, Peru elected a socialist, and this week, Honduras elected one of the leftists who has spent many years crusading against the coup efforts, the U.S. coup subversion within that country.
Yeah, Iraq is an interesting case, and I'm sure they were included mainly as a way for the U.S. to try to pull them more into their fascist cabal. The current government of Iraq represents the Shiite minority in Iraq, and it so therefore, because the Shia people are very close religiously to Iran, it makes good sense that the people are very close to Iran. So that's a conundrum for the United States. On the United States' side, on the American imperialist side, in other words, the American imperialists did install that government after years of bloody intervention and occupation of Iraq, and they're still occupying Iraq. So yeah, that's an interesting aspect there. Next on the list, Chinese President Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping's keynote speech at a forum on China-Africa cooperation and the opening of the China-Laos Railway. Chinese President Xi Jinping, his keynote speech at a forum on China-Africa cooperation meeting on Monday has shed light on the experience of the development of China-Africa ties and has drawn a new blueprint for China-Africa cooperation, according to analysts. Addressing the opening ceremony of the 8th Ministerial Conference of the FOCAC on Monday, Xi hailed the spirit of China-Africa friendship and cooperation and announced a series of major measures and pledges for furthering ties, with 9 cooperative programs included injecting strong impetus into the building of a high-level China-Africa community with a shared future. The China-Africa relationship is at its best in history, says Li Jinfeng, Executive Vice President of the China-Africa Institute, lauding FOCAC as a pace setter in the international cooperation with African countries, with emphasis on implementation as its salient feature. The heads of state diplomacy has played a crucial role in the high-level political mutual trust and profound friendship between the two sides, Lee said. The 9 cooperative programs in the next 3 years announced by Xi cover medical and health, poverty reduction, and agricultural development, trade promotion, investment promotion, digital innovation, green development, capacity building, culture, and people-to-people exchange, as well as peace and security. The programs fit the conditions and characteristics of the African continent and comprehensively respond to African people's concerns, said Wang Heng, vice president of the Institute of African Studies of Zhejiang Normal University. Analysts point out that the 9 programs focus on development, which holds the master key to solving all problems and will inject new impetus into China-Africa cooperation. And as always, these are just some highlights of the article that I'm referencing, and the link to the article will be included under this video. Rainer Shea?
I'm always thinking when I hear stories like this, what does this mean for imperialism? And when I say imperialism, I'm not claiming that both China and the US are imperialist. When I talk about imperialism, I'm only talking about the actual imperialism, which comes from the side of the so-called West, not from China. China is not an imperialist power. And I'm gonna share some good content on my screen, start broadcast. Anyway, it seems like there's more push and pull here, similar to Iraq, where you have all of these African countries that are embracing China's development, Chinese partnerships out of practical necessity. But my guess is that a lot of those countries are at the same time participating in some of Washington's antics. Like did you list 16 African, say that 16 African countries are participating in that summit?
I think it was 15, but you're close. 15
Yeah.
out of 54.
Yeah, so minority, but still a substantial amount because of Washington's neo-colonial grip. And there are similar dynamics across the world in places like Latin America, where you have countries such as Brazil being willing to participate in China's, say, blockchain partnerships, while at the same time deferring to Washington in pretty much every other way. And you know, that's what Washington fears. Even though Washington seems like it's at a relative advantage, like it has leverage, it fears the fact that China is able to fulfill the practical necessities that these countries have. Whereas Washington, all it has to offer are predatory loans and neocolonial subjugation and war. So China has the advantage in winning hearts and minds.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct there. Okay. You know what dawns on me? I didn't say much about this China-Laos railway, but it's a very significant thing. China has just completed, and later this week will hold, along with Laos, in Laos, the opening ceremony of this railway. It's a high-speed railway. So this means that Laos, one of the poorest countries in the world, has high-speed rail before the United States ever contemplates high-speed rail. The United States still has no high-speed rail. So it's a pretty significant thing. Anyway, next on the list, the growing U.S. military and intelligence worries of civil war. Rainer Shea.
In this article, I cite a lot of military and intelligence documents that I've cited many times before, so it's obviously getting quite repetitive. But it's necessary to keep bringing these up because these documents portray military intervention within U.S. borders as inevitable and unavoidable in the coming decades. They portray a scenario where unemployment, infrastructure deterioration, environmental issues, inequality have driven the population to rebellion, and it's seemingly implying. You can find all the links to these in this article. It's seemingly implying that guerrilla warfare of some sort is going to break out in the coming decades in the United States in response to the dysfunctionalities of neoliberalism. And this year we've gotten some updates from intelligence operatives and sociologists in this country that corroborate these earlier expectations. The documents I've been talking about so far come from 2016, 2018. Now, this year, the FBI, one of the FBI, I don't think he's a director, a top FBI official said in interview after the Capitol Hill riot, in response to the question, are you wargaming? Is the FBI wargaming for a civil war? He basically, he didn't deny that the FBI is wargaming for a civil war. He cited an FBI director in stating that domestic extremism is the number one threat to national security in this country, and that certainly makes a civil war more likely. And then this April, the sociology professor Temitope Oriola predicted that America's marginalized communities are sometime soon going to rise up in arms in response to the intensification of police brutality. What we have is effectively an ever-tightening military occupation in this country, directed most of all against the very most disenfranchised, vulnerable communities. And at some point, he says, things are going to give. So it's clear that current events are vindicating these seemingly paranoid statements in recent years from U.S. military experts.
Yeah. Well, there certainly is a lot of indicators there pointing towards this great fear on the part of the intelligence, that they call intelligence, is essentially espionage and military apparatuses of the United States government and state. There's one thing I would quibble with a little bit about what you said. You said that this would be the beginning of guerrilla warfare. Well, there will be some guerrilla warfare. That'll be extremely insignificant and not have much of anything to do with what's going on. What we're really going to see is mass uprisings, masses out in the streets by the millions, like we saw in this last year when we saw 30 million Americans come out against police brutality, against the police state, and against all of the neoliberalism that has brought that on. That's the significant part of this. Revolution's made by the masses, and this will be a revolution, in my opinion. It's just my well-educated guess on the matter, but I think what we're going to see is the masses coming out by the millions. And when you have by the millions of people with guns in their hands, that creates a whole different dynamic than guerrilla warfare, you know. And the crucial element is that an authentic revolution of the socialist variety cannot happen without those millions. They are the important ingredient in all of this. So, but otherwise, yeah, that's some very interesting stuff. And like you say, we've got to keep taking a look every few months, even taking a look at where we're at in this coming civil war, because that's really what this will be, a civil war. And it'll include lots of the masses. It'll include a whole segment, a whole huge segment of the US military coming over to the side of the revolution, because that US military are the working class who will be rising up. They are the sons and daughters and mothers and fathers and uncles and aunts and cousins and nephews of the working class, which is the class that has been incredibly oppressed and repressed, increasingly under Biden's fascism, which is not a hell of a lot different than Trump's fascism, just as Trump's fascism was basically just picking up where Obama's fascism left off. These oppressors, they are what will instigate all this, and it will be massive. Okay, next on the list, Google is a CIA and Pentagon contractor embedded in the military-industrial complex. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's a video, and it would be best if people would just go and look at the video. However, Ben Norton, people who are in the know will know that he's with the Gray Zone, one of the people who are responsible for the Gray Zone. He's done this video, which is really quite fabulous, and I suggest that everyone watching watch this video. The link will be in along with the other links under this video. Google has spearheaded mass surveillance. Google is part and parcel of the US deep state. There is no point at which Google ends and the deep state begins. Google is a CIA and Pentagon contractor that cannot be separated from the military-industrial complex. Ben Norton discusses how Silicon Valley is a key part of the US national security state in his latest video. That's it.
Oh, I thought you might show video.
No, the videos, I don't know, like 40 minutes or something like that. It's way too long for us to show. But the convenience is that you can go watch it at your leisure.
Right. This is basically confirming what we have known from the start, except WikiLeaks has been able to give us more insight into the fine details of exactly how the national security state uses this partnership with big tech. A few years ago, it was revealed that smart TVs can be used by the CIA to hack to hack into people's homes and listen to them
and watch them
Yeah, watch them. Well, where's the? That's odd. Do smart TVs have cameras?
Most of all, I'd say pretty much all of them have cameras.
Oh, I didn't know it was.
But they definitely have speakers, microphones, and that kind of thing that can be used to listen. I mean, it's the same thing with these. The major companies all have these hubs, you know, that will sit there on a table, a little round thing or a little square block thing, and those fuckers are listening all the time. So Amazon, Google, you know, the major tech companies are listening to you all the time. They flag keywords. If they hear a keyword, they flag it. You say guerrilla warfare, right? All of a sudden there's a flag. If you've got a Google Hub or I don't know what they call them, the various, you know what I'm talking about, the various hubs that connect your voice with the internet. They'll be listening in. If you say one of those keywords, they'll be listening in and they'll flag it. And it'll go into a gigantic database. And from there.
Okay, well, where does this info come from? It sounds plausible, but I want to really get good documentation.
Oh, well, there's loads of documentation. I'll find that for you. The main thing is whether it's a smart TV or a hub, or your computer sitting on your desk or your laptop sitting in your lap, all of these devices listen to you and can listen to you. And the Five Eyes, you know, the Five Eyes, the conglomerate of 5 Anglo-Saxon nations with the US as its imperial hub. They have a massive operation, which is which is mostly computerized. I mean, you know, the people aren't the real thing about this. It's the massive computers and computer upon computer for you know, caverns full of computers, and all they do is listen to you or watch you and flag if there's anything that you say which they think is an indicator of something nefarious, something something that they don't like, or something that could be hostile to imperialism. So, but you know, I'll send you you know, documentation about this. I mean, you know, so you know, the Google listening into us now, or Amazon, or those kind of big players, that is just a small part of this whole operation, basically. But it's the part that's coming out right now. It's the part that we've got information coming out about right now. So that's the only difference there. Zionism and imperialism feed off of the vile conditions they create. Rainer Shea.
Israeli apartheid has created the inequalities which are behind the conditions that the Israelis use to rationalize their atrocities against the Palestinians. My article cites a study where these Israeli soldiers were interviewed, And the most outwardly racist ones, the ones who joyously participated in atrocities against Palestinians during the first Intifada, they all express sentiments about how Palestinians are filthy, primitive. They don't take care of their children. These characterizations, these perceptions are notable in the context of how these soldiers were stationed within Gaza refugee camps. They were witnessing the poverty that Israel's blockades, targeting of civilians in warfare, and forced displacement of Palestinians via land theft have created, and their visceral reaction was to blame these Palestinians for their circumstances, and that helped them rationalize engaging in brutality, cruelty against these people. So that's a micro version of the narratives, the rhetoric that goes into Zionism's larger war against Arabs, and on an even bigger scale that go into the so-called war on terrors, genocide against Muslims and Arabs around the world. Imperialism and Zionism create these conditions and then exploit them to paint these populations as backward. They need to be democratized, they need to be developed, or more often they need to be taught a lesson. Isn't that the basis for what Israel is doing? They're trying to teach the Palestinians a lesson by bombing Gaza civilian centers, by depriving Palestinians of food and water. They call that putting Gaza on a diet. By engaging in this blockade, by denying Palestinians in Gaza even the right to become refugees, by refusing to let them leave. These are the heinous practices that the Zionists engage in, and that the imperialists are engaging in on a wider scale.
Yeah. I just got a book. I haven't read it yet, but it's all about the fake democracy in Israel. How Israel is a fake democracy. If I ever get around to actually reading it, I'll let you know the results. But Israel is not a democracy. It's not even a country. It's not a nation. It's a fake nation. It's a Alexander Haig, who was the Secretary of State, I think, during the Ford and, or at least during the Ford administration, if I'm not mistaken. Alexander Haig once said, and is oh so true, Israel is America's aircraft carrier placed on land permanently, and used as America's projection of American imperialism throughout the Middle East. It was oh so true. Israel is not a nation in any sense of the word. It's made up by Zionists. It's not made up by Jews. I mean, they happen to be Jews, but it is not a Jewish homeland or a Jewish nation. You know, I mean, in the Russian Federation, there's a Jewish homeland, a Jewish nation that's a real Jewish nation. But this is not that. This is specifically a projection of American imperial power in the Middle East, dressed up as a country. So,
yeah. You know, the Jews are just the ethnic group that the imperialists have coincidentally happened to decide to weaponize in that particular part of the world. In other parts of the world, the imperialists wage war against Jews. And ironically, Israel is one of the countries that's been selling weapons, that
Right.
been giving weapons to
Like
the
in
Ukrainian
Ukraine,
Nazis.
like in Ukraine. Look at what the fascist government that the United States installed in Ukraine. Look at the way it has ethnically cleansed and mass murdered Jews in Ukraine, as a for instance. Okay, next on the list. That was Zionism. Truth and Lies About Stalin, an exclusive interview with Grover Furr. And as always, I'm just going to read you some highlights of this article. There's a lot more there, so you should take advantage of the link that we place underneath this video to get the full story. But I'll give you just a taste of this. The history of the Soviet Union continues to be buried under a veritable mountain of falsifications. On the occasion of the 140th birth anniversary of Joseph Stalin, we asked Professor Grover Furr to share with us his thoughts on some issues surrounding Stalin and the period of his leadership. Grover Furr, a professor of medieval English literature at Montclair State University in New Jersey, is well known for his research and writings on a vast range of issues about Soviet history. Some of his most famous books include Khrushchev Lied, The Moscow Trials as Evidence, Trotsky's Amalgams, The Mystery of the Katyn Massacre, The Evidence, The Solution, and others. The name of Grover Furr is included in the list of the 101 most dangerous academics in America. Many thanks to Professor Furr for his willingness to share his thoughts, and you can find his personal website. Well, I'm not going to read the website. It'll be in this article that we'll have the link to below this video. IDC asks, 75 years after his death, the name of Joseph Stalin remains at the epicenter of anti-communism. The bourgeois historiography, as well as the bourgeois political forces, continue vilification of Stalin, calling him a dictator, a bloodthirsty tyrant who supposedly killed tens of millions of people. According to your view, why anti-communists still focus on their attacks on Stalin, and what are the major sources of their claims? Then Grover Furr says, defenders of capitalism need to depict communism as something horrible. So in addition to hiding the horrors of capitalism, imperialism, they require a boogeyman to focus on as the epitome of the evil communism. Stalin was the leader of the USSR and the world communist movement during the period of its greatest triumphs, and therefore of its greatest threat to capitalism. So Stalin would be the natural target in any case. But there are at least two other factors. The first is Leon Trotsky, who lied about Stalin in virtually everything he wrote from 1928 until his murder in 1940. Trotsky's post-1929 writings were the first major source of lies and slanders against Stalin and the USSR. The second is Nikita Khrushchev. His secret speech of February 25th, 1956 to the 20th Party Congress was a devastating blow to the world communist movement. And it was an invaluable gift to the anti-communists of the world. After the 20th Party Congress, of October 1961, when Khrushchev and his people attacked Stalin even more viciously, with even more lies, Khrushchev and the CPSU sponsored hundreds of books and articles attacking and lying about Stalin. Khrushchev also sponsored hundreds of books and articles attacking and lying about Lavrentiy Beria, whose murder Khrushchev organized in June 26, 1953. Beria is not as significant a figure in Soviet history as is Stalin, but Khrushchev and his men slandered Beria at least as viciously, if not more viciously, as they did Stalin. And those who had been the closest to Stalin, Molotov, Melenkov, Kaganovich, supported Khrushchev in his unprincipled attack upon and murder of Beria. As a direct result of Khrushchev's anti-Stalin campaign, approximately 1/2 of all communists in the world outside the socialist bloc quit their parties. Some of them literally walked across the street and joined the Trotskyist parties. Concerning Khrushchev's lies about Stalin and Soviet history, we must remember that very few people at the time recognized them as lies. And nobody could prove that they were lies because Khrushchev never published any evidence. Nor did Khrushchev or his successors allow even party historians to see any primary documents in the archives. The lies by Khrushchev and his hundreds of writers were eagerly picked up by Western anti-communists and became the major source of anti-Stalin lies for all anti-communist writers and scholars that followed him right up to the present. Some of these Khrushchev-era Soviet anti-communist works were published in the West and widely publicized by the capitalists. Such writers include Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Roy Medvedev, Alexander Nikritch. Many of the works of Western experts on the USSR relied heavily on these Khrushchev-era falsehoods. Important examples are Robert Conquest's works and the biography of Bukharin by American historian Stephen Cohen. Under Brezhnev and his successors, Andropov and Chernenko, anti-Stalin books and periodicals were almost eliminated. Brezhnev and other Soviet leaders saw the great harm that Khrushchev and Khrushchev's inspired works were doing to the Soviet Union and the communist movement. But it is important to point out that these post-Khrushchev leaders never repudiated Khrushchev's lies about Stalin and the Stalin period. They could have done so. They and their researchers had access to all the evidence, all the archival documents that we have today, plus much more. They knew, of course, that Khrushchev lied, but they never directed any of Khrushchev, they never corrected any of Khrushchev-era's lies. IDC, how would you evaluate Joseph Stalin's overall contribution to the construction of socialism in the Soviet Union? Grover Furr. Under Stalin's leadership, the Soviet Union built a socialist society. Fascism was defeated. The international communist movement spread the ideas of Marxism-Leninism and of communism all over the world. Imperialism was dealt a death blow, often under the leadership of communist parties, always with their dedicated help. So there you go. That's it.
I was looking for a cool Stalin image to screen share. I'm sure I have plenty.
Well, everybody knows what Stalin looks like.
Yeah, well, he was, as I've observed, one of the greatest contributors to revolutionary theory because he essentially synthesized Marxism-Leninism. And we don't we don't call it Stalinism necessarily, because it's not like Stalin was the one who came up with these ideas. He merely summarized them in his book, The Foundations of Leninism, where he was trying to do justice and bring forth the ideas of his political partner Lenin. And for this, he's constantly torn down. He needs to be discredited in the eyes of the world as some kind of deceiver who was writing down these things about defeating imperialism with ulterior motives. And there's when I've encountered anti-Stalinist sentiments, I've gotten this strange feeling because I don't know if these people are aware or not that Stalin was one of history's foremost anti-imperialists, or one of history's biggest anti-imperialist leaders, that he wrote extensively about the strategies we're going to need to defeat imperialism. But it seems like if they do even know this basic stuff, they evidently compartmentalize it, categorize it as simply being more parts of Stalin's nefarious plots to gain power. And that's odd too, because Stalin apparently tried to step down something like 4 times, but the democratic structure of his party prevented him from doing that. He was so popular among his peers, among the people, that they kept him in power. And it's pretty ridiculous. There's this one part from from an article in the magazine Jacobin that encapsulates this. Jacobin called Jeff Bezos a bald, mustacheless Stalin of industry. So it sounds like, according to the anti-Stalinists, Stalin can mean anything or anyone that's perceived as sinister or imposing. It's lacking in substance.
Yeah. Stalin's contributions were quite significant, and perhaps his greatest contribution was the synthesizing and the popularization of Marxism-Leninism, which is based on the works of Marx, Engels, and Lenin. Stalin also made great contributions on his own. For instance, Socialism in One Country, which was a major change in social democratic thinking, and showed, I mean, now totally uncontrovertibly, because 100 years later, Socialism in One Country is, I mean, who would argue with it? Who would argue with the idea that socialism can be built or could be built in the Soviet Union when it was built in the Soviet Union? So that's his major contribution. Other theoretical contributions: the Popular Front, which broke decisively with Lenin, decisively with Marx and Engels, to push forward the idea of class collaboration with the enemy class. That was not so hot, not so good, but that's a major theoretical contribution of Stalin as well. Stalin has on his individual, his personal, his individual theoretical contributions. He presents kind of a mixed bag, but Socialism in One Country was certainly a major contribution to the advance of socialism around the world. the Popular Front, not so much, because the whole idea of collaboration with one's mortal enemies and pretending that, Khrushchev took this idea even farther with his, peaceful cooperation bullshit. The whole idea that that as a socialist country, you could collaborate with and coexist peacefully with your mortal capitalist enemies is, in hindsight, is a tremendous blunder that cost the working class worldwide more than, in my opinion, more than any other blunder that we communists have ever made. So anyway, that's my whole my whole idea about that. You have anything else to contribute? Anything else to say? Any final thoughts?
Well, when you point out how Stalin made the mistake of the Popular Front, it goes to show that we're not here to defend a person per se. We're not here to say that everything Stalin did was right. We're here to defend our movement, and to do that, it's necessary to
and the ideas.
To repudiate the falsehoods about Stalin's record.
Absolutely. He's not the first person to have made a mistake. I mean, all of us have made mistakes, I included, certainly. That's life. You make your mistakes, you live on. But one thing is for absolutely clear: capitalism is not a friend in any way, cannot be a friend in any way, cannot coexist peacefully. It is a mortal enemy, and there's only one response to that. Well, there's actually two. There's either revolution or resignation. You can either revolt, which is what I prefer, or you can resign yourself to having a capitalist overlord with his boot on your throat. Anyway, that's it for tonight, people. I want to thank Rainer Shea for his enormous contribution, as always, his fabulous articles, and thank all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in, and invite you back next week when we'll have another episode of Revolutionary Socialist Review with Chris Driscoll and Rainer Shea. And until then, I bid you a sweet adieu.